everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome. Today's topic is the differences between Kanban and Scrum. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you. I hope your day has been great. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining me. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're watching me from. I'm excited about today's topic and I hope you are as well. And so today's topic is about, the difference between Kanban and Scrum. And if you're joining me, hello. If you're joining for the first time, my name is Stella Iheanacho and I am the Scrum faculty lead, or say Agile faculty lead at NSTAR Technologies. And once every month, I'm trying to make it a habit to come on live on Instagram and teach anything regarding Agile or Scrum or any of the questions that everyone on my mailing list might be asking me questions. I like to come on live here and, pick one of those questions as a topic and clear it out and also get your feedback. If you have questions, you can also ask me questions in the comment section, whatever it is. I think the last month we talked about the difference between a project manager and a Scrum Master. And that was a really exciting topic because I know that there's some jobs out there you see project manager / Scrum Master and it's all confusing and everything. And so on the last live, I tried to cover what the differences are and also, what to do when you see such job title, what the expectation is from the recruiter or from the employer who's looking for a project manager and a Scrum Master. And so today I'm going to be talking about the differences between Kanban and Scrum. Because again, if you go online and look at some job descriptions, you see they're looking for a Scrum Master who knows Kanban, and all that. So it's like, what are the differences? What is Kanban? What is Scrum? And so I'm going to be going into that on today's call. I have my notes here because I don't want to miss anything. And so if you have any questions, put in the comment section. Hi, Mudia. I hope your day has been great. Where are you watching me from? Let me know in the comment section. Where are you watching me from? Are you one of our students or are you hoping to be one of our students? So where are you watching me from? Are you one of our students? And maybe what do you do? What do you do? I would love to know the answers to these questions in the comment section. So where are you watching me from? Are you one of our students? And what do you do? Let me know in the comment section. All right, so let's get cracking because it's going to be an exciting time. So Scrum, Kanban, Scrum. If you have an idea of what these are, let me know in the comment section as well. What is Kanban and what do you think? What is Scrum, right? And so one of the great things about Agile development, I would say, is just the way we manage projects or product development or project development, right? Where we are building things incrementally. So we're not waiting to the final products or projects before we show the client. We are building in bits and pieces. We are building incrementally, and in building, we're getting feedback from the client or we're getting feedback from the stakeholders. And based on that feedback, we're feeding that feedback back into our processes so that whatever product or whatever project we're delivering to the clients at the end of the day is exactly what they're looking for. So that is one of the great things about Agile development. And there are different approaches to Agile development. I don't know if you're aware of that, but there are different approaches to Agile development. And so Scrum and Kanban, those are two frameworks. So those are two frameworks in which we can manage projects in an Agile way, right? We can manage projects in an Agile way. And they both do have their advantages and they have their disadvantages. But I always say the good thing about Agile is we're not saying that you have to use a particular framework to manage your project, right? What we're saying is it depends. When you get into an environment, when you get into a company, right? If they already have a particular framework that they're using and it's successful and it helps them and everything is great and amazing, fine, you don't really need to change. But as a Scrum Master or as an Agile coach, when you come into an environment, one of the key skills I always say you need to have is the skill of observation. Figure out what kind of products are they working on? What kind of products are they deploying? How are their teams functioning, right? What kind of environment is it? What kind of enterprise is it? And with that information, you can make changes, right? You can suggest, you can recommend, maybe this framework will not work, maybe we should merge this framework, etc. And so that's one of the great things about Agile is you can figure out, do we use Kanban, or do we use Scrum, or do we use something else, to just ensure that at the end of the day that the teams are effective, the products are being delivered, swiftly. We're getting feedback from the clients, that there is just that collaboration going on. So I wanted to just put that out there. Kanban and Scrum have its disadvantages and its advantages, but at the end of the day, what really drives the choice of what framework a company would use will really be what kind of company is it really, right? And so let's go into a little bit history as to Kanban. What is Kanban, right? So first of all, Kanban is a technique that was popularized by Toyota. Yes, so as part of Toyota's production system, and so it was designed to support just-in-time manufacturing. So what that means is, if there is a product or a stock that is low or that is coming to zero, the company or the manufacturing team are aware of this and they can easily replicate or reproduce. So it helped them to just enhance that continuous flow. So they didn't have to wait for a part to finish, or they didn't have to wait for a particular tool to be zero. They could get that signal, right? They knew the quantity, and so it was kind of like to enforce just in time, right? So just in time manufacturing. So we're manufacturing just in time. We're not gathering products that we don't need. We're not gathering tools that we don't need, and it really helped eliminate waste. So Kanban was reinforced, or was just part of that whole Toyota production system, and so it was popularized by Toyota. And now in this current dispensation, if I can use that word, there's something called the Kanban Method, and this is a popular concept by David Anderson. And so this is more about just having a set of principles and a set of practices that talks about implementing a lean product development process. I'm going to say that again. So the Kanban method is popularized by David Anderson, and this is all about using a set of principles and practices to talk about having a lean product development approach. So don't get so confused with all the words that I'm using, but I'm going to really explain it to you. I just thought it was necessary to go back to the history a little bit so you understand where Kanban is from and why Kanban is what is called Kanban, right? So we talked about Kanban from the Toyota just-in-time manufacturing, trying to avoid waste, right? I've talked about the Kanban method, which is more about producing or deploying products, but just in a lean fashion. And we talk about lean. What are we talking about? Avoiding waste. So you see the similarities between both, right? All right, so now that is Kanban. So let's talk about Scrum. So what is Scrum? Just a high level. Scrum is different because he has its own processes and practices. So we're talking about the artifacts. We're talking about the Scrum roles. We're talking about the time box event. So that's what makes Scrum. I always say Scrum is kind of like it's like a toolbox, right? And so there are different things that make it work. And so we're talking about the roles: the product owner, Scrum Master, development team. We're talking about the artifacts, right? We have the burn down chart, the burn up chart, the velocity chart, and then we're talking about just even the time box, the ceremonies that are there to make Scrum work. So we're talking about the daily stand-up, we're talking about retrospective, we're talking about sprint planning, we're talking about refinement for some companies, right? And we're talking about the sprint review. And so Scrum is there to just ensure like there's increments and there's that iterative processes going on, ensuring we can manage complex software and product development using incremental approach, using the iterative approach as well. So that is Scrum. So that's kind of like the definition differences between Kanban and Scrum. And so if you're following me, let me know in the comment section. I want to make sure that I have not lost you with all these big words. Oh my goodness. Okay. Now, if you go back to the beginning of what I said, that sometimes it's really good how in Agile there is not really one size fits all. It really depends on the enterprise or the company as a whole. And so you find that some Scrum teams actually use Kanban, right? Some Scrum teams use Kanban and probably even the Kanban board for more as a visual representation of their work. And so they select some principles of Kanban that they want, and they select some principles of Scrum that they want. And so you hear words like Scrum Ban, which is kind of like a modified version of Scrum and Kanban. And why most Scrum teams probably use the Kanban board is because the Kanban board shows like a consolidated, a very, very, very comprehensive view of what work everyone is working on in terms of priority, and they can also see the status, right? They can see how things are progressing across the board, and they can see how quickly they're progressing. And so you find out that some Scrum teams are also using the Kanban board and using some elements of Kanban even with their Scrum framework as well. So the question about which one is the best one is not really a question that we can just answer like that. Like, yeah, we need to figure out what works best for the teams, what works best for the organization, what kind of project are they working on, what kind of task are they working on, do they need that visualization? If they need that visualization from the Kanban board, we can't say, oh, because you're doing Scrum, you can't use the Kanban board. No, that's really, that I don't think that's what Agile, personally, I don't think that's what Agile is about. So you have to come to that environment and then choose what works best for the team, right? And so now let me go into detail as to the differences between Scrum and Kanban. The key differences between Scrum and Kanban. And the first thing I'm going to talk about will be roles and responsibilities. Now, Scrum is known for the roles. There's a reason why Scrum is Scrum. We have these key roles. We have the Scrum Master, we have the development team members, and then we have the product owner. So each of these Scrum roles have predefined responsibilities. So there's an expectation. There's a reason why a Scrum Master is a Scrum role. There's a reason why we have product owners in a Scrum role. There's a reason why we have the development team members, right? We have the Scrum Master, who should be the expertise of the Scrum framework, who should be able to guide, the team in becoming, agile, in embracing the principles, who help removing distractions, who help removing roadblocks, who would serve the Scrum team, but also serve the organization and serve the product owner. So a Scrum Master is an expert of the Scrum framework. And then we have the product owner, who really is that bridge between the stakeholders and the Scrum team, who is letting the Scrum team know like what the priorities are, who's prioritizing the backlog, who gives the Scrum team like focus on what they should work on, for every sprint. And we have the development team members, who are the ones actually executing the work, who are the ones who, who they refine the sprint backlog, they're self-organizing, they're cross-functional. And so we have these roles for a particular reason in Scrum, right? And so they're there. Without these roles, it's not really Scrum. Now, when it comes to Kanban, now this is where it gets really interesting. There are no predefined roles in Kanban. And so for a Kanban team, there's no Scrum Master. There might be a project manager, but there's no Kanban Master. They more enforce, I guess, collaboration. So if one person is out, one person is overwhelmed, you have somebody else who can step in. And we're not saying that for the Scrum team there isn't collaboration. There is collaboration. In fact, that's one of the key things about Scrum is collaboration. But however, for the Kanban, there are no roles. It's as simple as that. There are no roles for the team. There might be a project manager probably, but the team is encouraged really to collaborate and chip in when necessary, right? I hope that has helped. So that's the first difference. Now the second difference is, let's talk about timelines, due dates, timelines, delivery dates, etc. Now for Scrum, the deliverables are determined by sprints. And so sprint is one of the, it's kind of like a time box, event as well for Scrum. And when we say sprint, we're talking about some companies have 1 week sprint, 2 week sprint, 3 week sprint, but it cannot be more than 4 week sprints. And again, it really depends on the kind of company it is. I'm familiar with 2 week sprint, I'm familiar with 3 week sprint. And so the timelines and the due dates are really determined by this sprint. And so within that sprint, the expectation is that the work must be completed. So the work that was put in the beginning of the sprint should be completed by the end of the sprint. Fingers crossed, right? So that is really the expectation. However, for Kanban, again, work is going on continuously. So products and processes are delivered continuously on an as needed basis. So they are not constrained by sprints. If there's going to be any time constraint, it will really be based on what is needed by the business, right? So they don't have to do a 2 week sprint or a 4 week sprint. It's just a continuous flow for Kanban. It's a continuous flow. If there's going to be a date constraint, like I said earlier on, it will really be maybe the business or maybe the department or maybe an expectation or maybe the organization, etc. So they are more of a continuous flow. While for Scrum, they have the time box of a sprint. So at the end of a sprint, right, we go through the ceremonies again, we go through the review, and then we have the retrospective, and then we have the planning, and then a new sprint starts. And again, the expectation is that whatever is being pulled into that sprint should be completed by the end of the sprint. So that was number 2, right? All right, so let's go to number 3, delegation and, and task prioritization. Now, for Scrum uses a pull method. And what does that mean? Or a pull system, right? Where we pull in work at the beginning of the sprint, right? So we don't necessarily pull in work in the middle of a sprint, only under special circumstances. And I'm not really going to go into all that detail, but we pull in work for each iteration at the beginning of the sprint, not at the middle, not 4 days in or 2 days in or 1 day in. No, we pull in at the beginning of the sprint. However, for Kanban, because it's a continuous flow, right? So team members can pull in work once a particular task has finished. So they're working on maybe 5 things and one task is finished. They don't have to wait to the end of the sprint to pull in work. No, they can pull in work. They can pull in work, in the middle. They can pull in work once the task is completed. They can pull in work when a task has been executed. And so that's how they prioritize their work, right? And so their work is just prioritized based on a task is finished, we pull in work. But for Scrum, the work is prioritized based on, okay, so the product backlog is prioritized. In the beginning of the sprint, we're probably going to do maybe, for example, 5 user stories, maybe with 2 story points each. And then as soon as we're done with that, we have to wait to the end of the sprint to start another, to put in another work. Now, that is on paper. Let me just say that, because sometimes when you're working in a real life environment, a real life situation, when a particular team member is done, when they are done with their task, right, they can start working on a particular user story that is coming up in the next sprint, but they cannot pull it into the current sprint because it's going to affect like velocity and etc, right? So they can start working on it, ahead of time, even if the current sprint is not done. But for the Kanban, they can pull in work. They don't have to wait till the end of the sprint. They can pull in work. Once a particular work is finished, they pull in and they continue. Okay. All right. Now, the 4th point will be change. So these 2 frameworks, how do they manage change? Now, we talk about empiricism and talking about, that Scrum, Agile is all about change. We get feedback, we get, the empirical information. What do we know right now? We're getting, on etc, we're getting feedback. However, changes during sprints are really strongly discouraged, right? And why is that? They always say teams should not make changes during the sprint. Again, there's a yes and no kind of situation when it comes to change. Why do we say changes are not encouraged during sprint? Because it distracts the team. Just imagine you're working on something you've worked on something for like the past 4 days, and out of nowhere they change, something changes, the direction changes. It kind of like throws the whole dynamic of the team off. But at the same time, if we're really agile, we shouldn't really be thrown off, right? We should be able to take that change and still run with it. But it's easier said than done. So I'm just going to say, when it comes to change, for Scrum teams, we are usually encouraged not to accept change midway. We can have negotiation. We can say, okay, we see this change. We know you want to make this change, but can this change wait? By the time we start the next sprint, we can work on this change. And that's the reason why our time box for sprint is usually 4 weeks maximum, or some companies do 2 weeks, because what cannot wait for 2 weeks? Think about it. You do get me? Only if it's something really important, then yes, we have to take in that that feedback, that change, and start working on it immediately. However, if it can wait, it would wait. So that's where the Scrum Master, you come in, you negotiate, you figure out exactly what the extent of that change is, what is it, who is it impacting, what is it impacting, etc. Now for Kanban allows for change to be made anytime. So it can be made midstream, beginning. It allows again for that continuous flow, and so it allows for iterations, continuous improvement, even before the project is completed. Now for Scrum, the change is kind of like discouraged before the project is completed, right? However, for Kanban, that change is welcome midstream. That's a mid-sprint because there's no sprint, right? Midstream. And so that's another difference between Kanban and Scrum when it comes to how do we accept change? How do we walk around change? Now, the next point again is when it comes to key metrics, like measurement of productivity and key metrics, they are so different. So for Scrum, we're talking about we measure productivity using probably something like velocity chart, like velocity through the sprint. And just a quick overview of what velocity is. It's just really, the measure of how many story points was completed in the previous sprint. And with that information, you can kind of like forecast how many story points, a particular team is going to do in the future. That is, if everything stays the same, and we know that everything will never always stay the same, and that's why some Scrum Masters and my colleagues in the field always say velocity is not really a key matrix for productivity, but hey, that's what we have right now. So the velocity, right? Now for Kanban is a whole different ball game. We talk about work in progress, we're talking about cycle time, right? We're talking about lead time. So these are like the key metrics of or key measurement of productivity for Kanban. And so as I define velocity, which is having an idea of what story point or how many story points the team completed in the previous sprint, and using that, maybe calculating the average, and then using that as a measure for how many they can complete in the future. Let me give you just a quick definition of what the metrics for Kanban are. So talk about lead time. So lead time is a period between when a task appears in the workflow and when it leaves. So from the beginning, when a task appears, and when a task leaves the workflow, right? So that is what lead time is. And they were talking about cycle time. So cycle time begins at the moment when a new task enters the in progress and when somebody starts working on it actually. So let me say that again. Cycle time is when a task goes into the in progress swim lane and when someone actually starts working on it, right? And the work in progress is really about, it represents the number of tasks that a team or an organization is working on per time. At one time. So how many tasks do we have on the work in progress? How many people are working on it, right? How long are they working on it for, etc. So those are like the key matrices for Kanban. All right. Next difference between Kanban and Scrum and Kanban would be for Scrum. Scrum is usually used, in environments where the priorities don't necessarily change that much over time. We can get feedback from the client, yes, but we have an idea of exactly, what we're building, right? But for Kanban is best used for projects that have widely varying priorities. So it can be in an organization where they have a priority today, they have another priority tomorrow, they have another priority today. Like their priorities are really all over the place. But for Scrum, we have an idea of what we're building. We can get changes, but we can get changes on what we're building. It's not like today we want to build an iPhone, next tomorrow we want to build a car, next tomorrow we want to build an Active Directory, next tomorrow we want to deploy a manufacturing executive system. No, there's an idea of what we're building, and we are refining, we're building incrementally, we are building iteratively, we're getting feedback from stakeholders, from the clients, etc. Right? But for Kanban, it's usually maybe best for projects that have widely varying priorities, basically. And so that's one of the key differences between Scrum and Kanban. Another key difference between Scrum and Kanban will be how they release. Because at the end of the day, when you're done building, you have to release your project, your product, your software, your service, whatever it is, right? To the customer, to the client, right? And so for Scrum, we release at the end of each sprint. So we build that we build that working software, right? At the end of each sprint, our release methodology is at the end of each sprint. So we don't release in the middle of the sprint. We know what. And that's the reason why sprint planning is really important, so that we know, okay, at the end of this sprint, this is the expectation. This is what we're going to show during sprint reviews, what we're going to demo during sprint review. Now for Kanban is a continuous delivery. So they are not bound again by the Scrum ceremonies. And so when they're done, remember what I said earlier, when they're done, they pull in something new. So there's continuous delivery going on, continuous delivery going on, continuous integration, continuous, deployment, etc., CI/CD going on. And so they're not really bound by review. They don't have to wait till the next week, Wednesday, to review to stakeholders. No, so it's continuous delivery. And so these are like really the key points. And I think I talked about seven key differences between Kanban and Scrum. If there's any other one that you have that you've experienced or that has come to mind that you think I did not mention, please put in the comment section. I know that there is more than this, but please put in the comment section as well. So I just want to really summarize, right, based off of what I've been saying so far. For Scrum, Scrum is where it's just amazing, because I'm a Scrum Master. I'm not biased, but I'm a Scrum Master and also a certified Agile coach as well. And so my background is Scrum. I know Scrum is where everybody comes together, we come together and we agree, on a large plan. We have an idea of where we're going, and then we break it into smaller segments, right? And so the team begins to work on this smaller segment, leading up incrementally, basically. And so it really helps with focusing. So we have an idea what we're working on, and we have that focus. But the issue sometimes with that focus is if there is a delay, the entire project could possibly come to a halt, right? There could be this fire brigade approach. It could be interdependencies which there shouldn't be in user stories technically, but in real life sometimes you have that interdependence, and when there's a delay, it could affect the release, it could affect the deployment of a particular project or product. But you see, in Kanban sometimes there really isn't no task is tied together in that kind of way, and that's why Kanban have that whole continuous flow process going with them. And Kanban as well works well when used alongside Scrum. And that's why we have that whole Scrum band coming into play. And that's because Kanban can be used to visually improve the flow of work in Scrum, regardless of the framework being used. So it could be Scrum, it could be something else, regardless of the framework being used. Kanban just gives you that visual representation of what the team is working on, and then you can see how it's flowing. And again, depending on the company, they could be different. Some companies could have, their Kanban board could be backlog or to do, in progress, or whatever it is, done, etc. So it just gives you that visual representation of what the team is working on. And again, the good thing about Kanban is that it can also be customized to fit the processes and the work systems that the company already has in place, right? And so with forecasting, we're just using the Kanban board to having an idea exactly how the team should work. Some companies use Kanban. And another thing I've also realized, even with my experiences, I've worked in a company where we had the Scrum teams, and then we had the Kanban teams, right? And so again, we have some teams that are working with tasks that are not tied together, with tasks that are of very priority, so they can use the Kanban board. And then maybe you have a Scrum team that is focused, they're upgrading, or they're working on features, or they're working on bugs, defects, or whatever it is that they're building a product or a software. They will obviously probably want to use a Scrum board, or just be very, very 100% Scrum, right? And so all I'm trying to say is, it's important to know the differences, right? It's important to know where you say a job description asking for someone who has background in both. The differences is really important, so you know what environment would use what environment will flourish using Scrum and Kanban. And then when you get into an environment and you feel like, maybe we need to have that visual representation of what the team is working on. Maybe our tasks are not necessarily would not thrive with Scrum. Maybe we should actually use the Kanban board, right? So just because you have that experience and you have that knowledge, you'll be able to prefer or give them a really well-rounded recommendation that would help them flourish as a team, or as an organization, or as a department. So I really hope that all my talking so far has been helpful to you. And if you're watching this on replay, let me know in the comment section. Just write replay and let me know if I've answered any questions that you have. And if you have any questions that I haven't answered during my talk between the difference between Kanban and Scrum, please put it in the comment section, or send us a DM, and I will be happy to take on both in any way, comment or DM. I'll be able to answer any of those questions. And I guess till next month, hopefully I'll come back on again to talk about something regarding Agile or Scrum. So if you have any question, maybe you're studying, or you're a Scrum Master, you're an Agile coach, whatever it might be, and that you need me to talk on, you need my expert opinion, please send us a DM, and then we will definitely get right into it. Once again, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with me. My name is Stella Iheanacho, certified Scrum Master and Agile coach, and a Scrum facilitator and lead teacher here at MStar Technologies. Till next time, just keep scrumming. Bye, everyone.